It was a night like any other. A Tuesday. Dr. Amanda Hartley was finishing up some paperwork at her doctor office. There. All done, said Dr. Hartley, putting her paperwork in a big binder. Now I can go home, where it's safe, unlike here at my office, where there are needles and knives and stuff, 'cause I'm a doctor. She tucked the binder into a huge pocket in her lab coat and walked out the office door, not even bothering to close or lock it behind her. "Hey," came a voice from the shadows. "What is it?" said Dr. Hartley, completely unaware of the terror and fright she was about to experience. "You forgot to shut and lock your office door," said the voice. "Oh," said Dr. Hartley, "I don't really care. I'm not really Dr. Hartley. You see, I'm a demon and I stole her skin." "Aha," said the voice, and then they emerged from the shadows. It was a skinless Dr. Hartley. "I knew you stole my skin and also my life," she said, pointing at the skin thief. "Yeah, you got me," said the skin thief, and they took off the skin and gave it back. "I don't know how to put this back on," said Dr. Hartley. "Don't look at me," said the skin thief. "You're the doctor." It was the spookiest kind of night imaginable. The dim street lights flickered mysteriously as esteemed chemical engineer Clarissa McClare walked home alone after a long night of engineering some top-secret chemicals. Suddenly, a mysterious voice echoed from across the street. "Hey, creepy night, huh?" Clarissa looked toward the voice and saw a shadowy figure approaching. "Yeah," she said, "I don't really like it, but I rolled my car in a street race yesterday, so I have to walk home now." As the shadowy figure came near, Clarissa sensed something dark and frightening. "Speaking of creepy," said Clarissa, "your mysterious shadowy form is giving me the G. Willikers, if you know what I mean." "I was about to say the same thing," said the shadowy figure. Clarissa contemplated this for a moment and then said, "Wait, what?" The shadowy figure drew even nearer and said, "Well, you're a weird shadowy figure walking along the street alone." "No," said Clarissa, "you're the shadowy figure." "I think you died in that street race crash," said the figure, "and you're a ghost now or something." Clarissa stared at the figure, who is looking super ghostly up close. "I'm pretty sure you're the ghost, not me," she said. Said the figure. "Well, I don't know about all that." Suddenly, a third figure appeared, a flowing, semi-transparent being with thin silvery strands emanating from its body. "Hey," said the third figure, "I'm definitely a ghost, and thus as an expert in this sort of thing, I can definitively say that neither of you are ghosts." "Oh," said Clarissa. "Yeah, thanks," said the shadowy figure. And then Clarissa woke up, and she was in hell, and it had all just been a dream. 10 dead horses lay rotting on the side of the road. "Wow," said Sophia as she walked past the gross horse bodies. "That really sets a spooky mood." Sophia was a scientist for NASA, working on a new top-secret project, and she was late for her first briefing. "Ah, there's the secret NASA bunker," said Sophia, pointing at the bunker as if to show someone, even though she was alone. A few moments later, she had arrived at the bunker door, scanning her keycard and entering through a set of large metal doors. "Sophia, there you are," said Eileen, Sophia's boss. "Sorry I'm late," said Sophia. "Hey, did you know there's 10 dead horses rotting outside?" "Oh yeah," said Eileen. "They've always been there." "What?" said Sophia. "Yeah, they've always been there," said Eileen. "What do you mean they've always been there?" said Sophia, with a befuddled look on her face. "I mean, maybe not always, but at least as long as I've worked here," said Eileen. "Wait," said Sophia. "Haven't you worked here, like, a while?" 30 years, said Eileen, and she pointed to a big 30 years at the secret NASA bunker button on her lapel. "Now that you mention it, that is sort of weird." Sophia continued looking befuddled and said, "You've walked past 10 dead, rotting horses for 30 years and only just now realize it's sort of weird?" "I don't know," said Eileen. "All right," said Sophia, clearly not satisfied with Eileen's answer. "You're probably wondering what your job is gonna be here," said Eileen. "When people die, their ghosts go up into space, and they've been kinda junking the place up. So we're trying to build a big scoop to round them all up and move them out of the way. Also, we're gonna kill you, and you're going to work on this from the ghost side." "Oh no," said Sophia. Then Eileen shot her with a regular gun, but it did the trick and Sophia was no more. There were no mirrors in Andrea's house, not a single reflective surface. Andrea preferred it this way. She didn't like mirrors. She didn't like what she saw in them. Around midnight, as Andrea was deciding whether to go to bed or watch one more episode of Iron Fist on Netflix, there was a loud knock on her front door. "Oh no," said Andrea to herself. "I hope I'm not watching Iron Fist too loudly and annoying the neighbors with all the punching sounds." She got up from her couch and opened the front door. Standing on her doorstep was a young woman with raven black hair and a dress that had a bunch of ravens printed on it. Also, she had a black ring embossed with ravens, and her shoes had the word Raven printed on the front. "Hey," said the woman, "my name is Robin. Sorry if I woke you up." "No, I was awake," said Andrea. "I was just watching Iron Fist on Netflix." "Oh," said Robin. "Is it any good?" No," said Andrea. Robin rocked back and forth awkwardly, then said, "This is a weird request, but could I borrow a mirror?" "I'm sorry," said Andrea, "but you've more or less arrived at the very worst house in the world if you need a mirror. I don't even have a mirror in my bathroom. Heck, I've even sanded down my silverware. There are no reflections here." "What? Why would you do that?" asked Robin. "Whenever I look in a mirror," said Andrea, "instead of seeing my reflection, I see a huge flesh-colored chrysalis. If I stare at it long enough, it will begin to shake and pulse. Somehow, deep down, I know that if I stare at it too long, it will burst open, letting out whatever's inside. But I always look away before that happens." Robin stood there, mouth agape. "Oh my God," she said. "I've been seeing the same thing. I came to borrow a mirror to figure out if it was just my mirrors doing that." Andrea and Robin ended up dating for a while, but it didn't last. All they really had in common was their shared vision of the chrysalis behind the mirror. Raindrops poured from the sky like knives, like actual knives, literally cutting pretty much everything to shreds. "Geez, this rain," said Lily, a small woman in her mid-30s wearing a dark blue jumper. She was standing inside a sort of bunker, looking out a bullet and knife-proof window. "I always knew something like this would happen," she said to herself, and then gave a little chuckle. "I mean, I didn't know it would be knife rain, but something." She had built this bunker years before, for the purpose of surviving an eventual end times scenario. It was stocked with 20 years worth of food and water, and every single Pokemon card ever printed. It was her most prized collection. She even had all the first printings, and holos, and misprints in every language they were ever released in. It was the most complete Pokemon card collection in the entire world. "Well, time to look at my Pokemon card collection until life on the surface begins anew," said Lily, and then she opened the first binder full of cards and began looking them over. Weird," she said, staring down at the cards. She opened a second binder. "Super weird." A third binder. A fourth. "I don't understand," she said, her voice beginning to tremble. "The Pokemon, their faces. On each and every card, it wasn't the sweet, loving face of a delightful pocket monster staring back up at her. It was her face. Each Pokemon's face had been replaced with that of her own. "How could this have happened?" she yelled. "I mean, the knife rain I get, anticipated even. But this?" Suddenly, the spectral form of Dunsparce, a Pokemon that looks kind of like a snake bug, appeared before her. "It turns out you were Pokemon all along," said Dunsparce, and then they faded away. "What?" said Lily. "I don't get it." And she never did, and the whole world died. There is no place like home. That's especially true if you live inside a monster's stomach. Such was the case of Teresa, whose apartment got swallowed up by some sort of basilisk, and she decided it was easier to just keep living there than find a new place in this economy. "Man, I'm getting hungry," thought Teresa. "It's too bad they don't deliver pizza here, to wherever this basilisk has wandered off to today. Well, time to check the mail." She opened her front door, stepped onto the sticky surface of the basilisk's horrible stomach, and checked the makeshift mailbox she had set up near the esophagus. The motto of the U.S. Postal Service is, "Neither snow nor rain, nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds." And good Lord do they mean it, because Teresa still got mail here inside the basilisk. "Oh, what's this?" said Teresa, looking at a long flyer. It was a menu for a pizza parlor. "We deliver anywhere," it said. "Even weird, terrible, unthinkable places. Just the worst places will show up with a hot, fresh pizza for you. Don't even worry about it." "Huh," said Teresa. "Well, they definitely sent this ad to the right lady. Surely fortune smiles upon us both this day." She made her way back into her apartment and dialed the number on the flyer. "Pizza," said a voice on the line. "You want it?" Yeah, I guess," said Teresa. "I do want it. The pizza, that is." "Great, we'll be right there," said the voice. And then there was a knock at her door. She would have thought this was super strange, but remember, Teresa lives in a world where basilisks eat apartments, and then the tenant sometimes just keeps living there. With great speed and hunger, Teresa swung open the door. Standing there in front of her, holding a hot, fresh pizza, was Satan. "Hey, I'm Satan," said the Demon King. "You can have this pizza for your soul." Teresa looked at that pizza and then back up at Satan. "No," she said, "that's a really bad deal." Teresa shut the door and then made herself some macaroni and cheese instead. They called her the Bone Stealer. She would go from town to town as the sun set, taking bones directly out of people's bodies. One particularly spooky evening, the Bone Stealer arrived in front of a small bakery in a small town, and as the sun went down, she opened the bakery's door and stepped inside. "Hey," said Claire, head baker and owner of the shop, "we're about to close for the night." "That's okay," said the Bone Stealer. "I'm not here for the bread. I'm here for one of your bones." "Are you that Bone Stealer I keep hearing about?" asked Claire. "Yeah, that's me. I don't steal bones, though. People just let me take them, and I only want one of your bones." No," said Claire. "I'm not gonna just, let you take one of my bones." "I always get my bones," said the Bone Stealer. "Every time, willingly given. Don't you wonder why?" "Not really," said Claire. "Oh," said the Bone Stealer, disappointed. People were usually really interested in finding out her secret methods. "Anyway, I gotta close up," said Claire, sweeping the floor with a really big broom. "I'll give you $10 for a bone," said the Bone Stealer. "No," said Claire. $100, said the Bone Stealer. "Is this how you get bones? You just buy them?" "No," said the Bone Stealer. "I mean, sometimes." "I really gotta close up," said Claire. $150, said the Bone Stealer, who held out 150 crisp $1 bills. "I need all of my bones now," said Claire. "Well, how many dollars do you want then? Come on, I don't got all night." "I just don't want to give you any bones for any dollars," said Claire. "Is that your final answer?" asked the Bone Stealer. "Yeah, pretty much," said Claire. A look of great relief flashed across the Bone Stealer's face. "Finally, I'm free of the curse," she said, and then vanished into dust, leaving her huge bag of bones behind. Claire stared at the bag for a moment and then sighed. "Now I've got to clean up all these gross bones." "There has been a murder," shouted Madam Wright. "Oh no," said Rebecca, getting up from a luxurious Chase lounge. Rebecca had only just arrived at Madam Wright's fabulous and spooky manor, and she certainly had not anticipated a murder happening so quickly. "Yes, oh no indeed," said Madam Wright, who needlessly swished around her long black velvet cape. "Who got murdered?" asked Rebecca. "It was Constance," said Madam Wright, who held her cape and spread her arms out so that she looked a little like a bat. "Constance?" asked Rebecca. "No, Constance with an A," said Madam Wright. "Oh," said Rebecca. "I don't think I know her." "Nobody did," said Madam Wright with a ghostly quiver. "That's what makes her murder so unsolvable." "Wait, nobody knew her?" asked Rebecca. "Yeah," said Madam Wright, who had walked over to the snack table and was now eating a blueberry muffin. "Well, didn't you know her?" asked Rebecca. "No," said Madam Wright, spitting out a bit of muffin as she did. "How did you know her name then?" asked Rebecca, who was finding Madam Wright's open-mouth muffin eating a little gross. "I asked her," said Madam Wright, shoving another muffin in her mouth with one hand and swishing her cape around with the other. "What, before she was murdered?" asked Rebecca, averting her eyes from Madam Wright's extremely muffin-filled mouth. "Yeah," said Madam Wright. "I asked her only seconds before the terrible deed was done." "Oh," said Rebecca. "So did you see who killed her then?" "I mean, not technically," said Madam Wright, who tried to eat a third muffin, but there was still too much of the first two in her mouth. What does that mean? Asked Rebecca. It means, said Madam Wright, that I killed her myself, obviously. Ah, said Rebecca. Yeah, that's what I thought this was leading to. Why am I here? Why did you invite me to your spooky manor? Madam Wright jauntily walked over to Rebecca, bits of muffin falling out of her sinister mouth. I just wanted someone around when I announced the murder, you know? Yeah, said Rebecca. I get that. It's lonely to murder someone alone, but sometimes you just gotta work with what you've got. Suddenly, Madam Wright fell to the floor, stone dead. The muffins were poisoned, you see, said Rebecca. Then she looked around the empty manor and sighed. Yeah, this moment would have been much better with someone around. Oh God, said Justine, falling to her knees. It turns out I'm the ghost. Justine had just been through a whole ordeal in a spooky haunted hotel, but it turns out it was her doing the haunting. How did I not know I had died? She said out loud. I don't know, said Elizabeth, whose hotel room Justine had been haunting. But now that you understand what's going on, can you get out of here? I need to get some shut-eye. Justine glared at Elizabeth using her spooky ghost eyes. God, I'm sorry if this has been such a hardship for you, but I just found out I'm dead. Give me a break, you know? Elizabeth just rolled her eyes and said, I'm giving a big talk tomorrow at an important palynology conference. I need my rest. The science of palynology is so important these days, and this is the most important talk of my career. Justine's face crunched up in a ghostly scowl, and she mumbled something to herself about nobody understanding. Look, I'm sorry you're a dead ghost and all, but that has nothing to do with me, and I really think you should leave, said Elizabeth, who was already in her rubber ducky pajamas and neatly tucked into her king-sized hotel bed. Fine, said Justine. I'll go and haunt someone else for a bit. Why don't you just cross over? You don't really need to do any haunting here. It's not like your job, right? Said Elizabeth. Oh yeah, said Justine. I'll just cross over. Thanks, Elizabeth. How did you know my name? Said Elizabeth, a little spooked out. It's stitched on your rubber ducky pajamas, said Justine. Oh yeah, said Elizabeth. I made these. I do some sewing now and then. I like them, said Justine. Thanks, said Elizabeth. Well, see you later then, said Justine, and she crossed into the realm beyond life, the realm of the dead. It was a large gray sphere with streams of green goo flowing above like celestial goobers. Welcome, said the angel of death, Deborah. This is the afterlife. Oh, said Justine. It's not really what I imagined it would be. Yeah, we get that a lot, said Deborah. Nobody expects the afterlife to be a huge gray sphere in a green goo sky, but this is pretty much it. Sorry. That's all right, said Justine, and she floated up to the goo and gave it a good sniff. Weird, she said to herself. It smells like fruit by the foot. 300 years ago, on a seaside cliff at midnight, a woman in a flowing white dress stood staring at the moon in the sky. Her name was Isabella, and she was dying of a broken heart and also of poison, for she had been poisoned by an evil baroness. As the waves crashed against the cliff, she shouted one final word into the night, then cursed the word itself so that it would never be uttered again. And with that final act, she threw herself into the sea. 300 years later, on a similar night, a teenager named Stacy was walking along the cliffside, listening to the sea and the wind. Suddenly, she heard a ghostly howl, and the spectral form of Isabella was before her. Whoa, said Stacy, who had never seen a specter before. Hello, fellow cliffside wanderer, said Isabella's ghost. I haunt these cliffs, for I died here 300 years ago from a broken heart, and also poison, and also tossing myself into the sea. That's pretty cool, said Stacy, who thought it would be nice to be a weird glowing specter when she died. I only have one regret from my life, said Isabella. One deed that I wish I had not did, but it was done and remains so, and my spirit thus cannot find rest. What? Said Stacy, who had missed most of that because the wind was really bad that night. I cursed a word when I died, and that word has been spoketh no more. But I loved the word, and more than anything wish its return. Okay, I can tweet it if you want, said Stacy. I think I still have my Twitter account. At the very least, I can say it a bunch. That would bring much light to my heart and warmth to my spirit, said Isabella. So what's the word? Asked Stacy. Scabba, said Isabella incoherently. It just sounds like you're saying nonsense, said Stacy. It is as I feared, said Isabella. The curse preventeth even me from speaking the cursed word. That sucks, said Stacy. You want to just come up with a different word instead that means the same thing? That's a good idea, said Isabella. How about Ulawi? Sure, said Stacy, who thought it was a terrible and fake-sounding word. What does it mean? It means the greatest despair imaginable. It means your heart is falling apart as it realizes it will never be happy again. Okay, I tweeted it, said Stacy. Thank you, said Isabella. I am no longer Ulawi, and my soul may rest. With that, she faded away, and Stacy went home and ate some Eggo waffles. The year was 1993. The place was the set of Clarissa Explains It All at Nickelodeon Studios in Orlando, Florida. Filming for the day had just finished, and Josie, who worked in the lighting department, was just about ready to go home. They had filmed the episode The Darling Wars that day, where Clarissa and Ferguson were home alone trying to scare each other. There had been some complicated lighting and rain effects, so Josie had had to work even harder than usual. What a day this was, she said, and what an absolute rascal Ferguson is, just a no-good rascally boy. All of a sudden, a dead body fell from the rafters above the set and landed a few feet from Josie. Oh my God, she said. Is that... It was Ferguson, or rather Jason Zimbler, the actor who played Ferguson. Finally, came a voice from above. I am free from my chains, free to spread my dark deeds across America and the world. What? Said Josie, trying to see who it was up in the rafters. A figure fell from above and landed between Josie and the disfigured dead body of Ferguson. Oh, it's you, said Josie, immediately recognizing Clarissa Explains It All star Melissa Joan Hart. That's right, said Melissa. It's me, Clarissa, and I have finally killed the dastardly Ferguson. I don't understand, but I'm calling the police, said Josie. The police will be of no use, said Clarissa. My power is too great now that I am unshackled from the Fergwad. All shall fall before my power, all shall taste the wrath that has been locked away inside me for millennia. Just then, Ferguson rose up, very much alive. Clarissa, he said, pointing one of his Ferg fingers at her. You will not be done with me so easily. Oh no, I forgot the amulet, said Clarissa. Yes, the Fergulet, said Ferguson. Until you find and destroy the Fergulet, I cannot be killed, and your power is limited to explaining things. Hey, can I go? Said Josie. It's been a long day and I'm super tired. Sure, said Ferguson. All right, said Clarissa, but then she came right up into Josie's face and added, but do not tell anyone what you have seen here today. It's just Hollywood stuff. It's just show business, you know? Sure, said Josie, and she never told anyone. Clarissa Explains It All went off the air a year later, but to this very day, Clarissa herself wanders the abandoned Nickelodeon studios looking for the Fergulet, ready to unleash her terror upon the world if ever she is to find it. The night was as cold as it was red. That's right, the night was red, as the local fire farm was in operation 24 hours a day, producing new batches of fresh fire, even during the very latest of hours. Anya Duval lived a few miles away from the farm, in a small house she had inherited from her mother. Tonight she was sitting on her roof, watching the farm's red glow, drinking a hot jasmine tea. What a world we live in, she said to herself. This world where we have to farm fire for some reason. I wish I knew the reason, but alas, I am not a farmer. What? Said a passing ghost. I'm talking to myself, said Anya. Replied the ghost, who hovered for a second and then floated away into the clouds above. Anya wasn't concerned with the ghost, as there were many ghosts in this world. They just sort of floated to and fro, not really bothering anyone. They were all naked and had extremely graphic bodies, but people were used to it. There was a low, weird rumble, and the house shook a bit. Oh no, said Anya, as her cup rolled off the roof. My tea! A second ghost caught the cup and brought it back to her. Here, said the ghost. All the tea fell out, but the cup is okay. Thanks, said Anya. Do you know what that rumbling was? Let me check my ghost vision, said the ghost, and Anya turned away. She didn't like to watch the ghosts while they used their ghost vision. It felt even more inappropriate than staring at their ghost junk. Oh, that's weird, said the ghost. What's weird? Asked Anya. The rumbling was you coming through a portal into this world, said the ghost. That is weird, said Anya. Too weird for me, said the ghost, who then floated up to the sky to hang out with the first ghost. The rumbling started again, this time louder and with a visual element, a bright spot in the air near where Anya sat. The spot grew brighter and brighter until it was about as bright as you could imagine a spot could be. Then out of the brightness stepped Anya, who sat down next to herself. Hey, I'm you from another dimension, said this new Anya. Cool, what do you want? Asked the first regular Anya. I come from a world where you don't have to farm fire. Fire just sorta happens on its own sometimes, said the portal Anya. And my house burned down. So, can I stay here for a few days? Another portal opened to the right of the second Anya, and out of it fell a dead, burnt-up Anya. Oh no, said the first Anya. I hope this doesn't keep happening, like, all night. Ariel from The Little Mermaid was sitting by the window of the highest room in the castle she now lived in, staring at the night sky. She had once been a mermaid princess until she decided she would rather be a human queen. At no point had she considered a life where she wasn't fabulously wealthy and powerful because, why would she want to be poor, like some sort of peasant? As the moon rose in the sky, a mysterious golden finch flew down and landed upon the windowsill.
Oh, what a delightful little bird,
said Ariel.
My name is Leona,
said the golden finch.
Leona, that's a beautiful name,
said Ariel.
I come with a dire warning. I have sensed great evil inside this castle, an evil that will spread across your country and destroy the lives of all it touches. Oh dear,
said Ariel.
Would you like to come inside the castle? We can search for the evil together. It'll be just like the adventures I used to have with Flounder before he passed away and we served him to the stable boys. Yes, please, let us begin the search right away,
said the finch. Ariel led the bird into the castle, and they soon arrived at a large room filled to the brim with gold and jewels.
This is the treasure room,
said Ariel, yawning.
I didn't realize so much gold existed in the whole world,
said the finch.
It's dwindling, but we'll soon be fixing that,
said Ariel, walking to the next room.
Here is the kitchen, where the flesh of animals is prepared for our consumption and pleasure.
You eat animals? asked the finch.
I'm a human now,
said Ariel.
And a queen. I could eat mermaid if I wanted to. No one would stop me.
Said the finch.
This way, to the dungeons,
said Ariel.
They're packed to the brim at the moment. There's been a lot of non-compliance in the kingdom lately.
I don't think I need to see anymore, said the finch.
I think you do,
said Ariel, and with a quick snatching motion, she had the bird firmly within her hands.
Please,
said the finch.
I'll just go. You'll never see me again. We keep animals in the dungeon too,
said Ariel, descending a dark staircase.
It seems like every week one of you is showing up to take away what is rightfully mine. Ah, here we are.
Please, said the finch, as she was shoved into a tiny cage filled with the skeletons of other birds.
Looking around here, you'd think, sure, she's got everything,
sung Ariel, walking out of the dungeon and leaving the finch in the putrid darkness.
But who cares? No big deal. I want more.
A cold wind blew across the lonely dark field, empty except for Camilla and her black truck. She was a small woman with raven black hair and a knife print dress. That's right, her dress had knives printed all over it, sinister knives. Knives caked with blood and cake. She walked to the back of the truck and opened the tailgate. In the truck bed was an old wooden chest, which she pulled on with all of her might until it slid out of the truck and crashed onto the grass below. Hey, came a distant voice. Camilla's eyes darted to and fro, but she could not make out where the speaker had called from. Yeah, said Camilla. What are you doing out there in that field with that chest? Asked the voice. I was gonna bury it, but probably not anymore, because you saw me, said Camilla. Oh, said the voice. I'm sorry, I can just go. It doesn't matter, said Camilla. I can't take the chance and bury this here now, so you might as well stay. She then reached her arms around the wooden chest and braced herself for what would certainly be a painful heave back onto the truck. I wish I could help you with that, said the voice, and then a figure emerged from the darkness, slowly moving toward Camilla and the truck. But I'm a ghost, so I can't, grab stuff. Camilla took her hands off the chest and spun around to get a good look at the source of the voice. It was a ghost, all right, hovering there in the moonlight, dripping ghost goo all over the grass and dirt. "Oh, you're a ghost," said Camilla. "I thought you were a living flesh person. I guess it doesn't matter if you see me burying this." "What's in it?" asked the ghost. "Human hearts," said Camilla. "Well, what?" said the ghost, their eyes boggling a bit. "I killed like 150 people and then kept their hearts for, nostalgia. But I'm going clean and taking some web design classes. I need to get rid of everything from my old life." "You know, I was murdered, and my killer took my heart," said the ghost. "I'm not saying it was you, but, Camilla looked closer at the ghost's spooky face. "Oh, yeah, no, I did kill you. Hold on one sec." She kicked open the chest and began rummaging through the hearts. "There we go. Yeah, this one's yours. I never forget a heart. They all tell a story." Camilla handed the heart to the ghost, who was able to hold it because it was, their heart. "I don't know how I feel about this," said the ghost. "I feel nothing," said Camilla, "except a burning passion for web design." "You mind if I keep this?" asked the ghost, still looking at their heart. "No, I'm gonna need that back," said Camilla, grabbing it from their ghostly hands. "I'll feel weird knowing one of the hearts isn't in the heart box." "Okay, that's fair. Have a good night then," said the ghost, and they began to float away. Camilla took a shovel from her truck, and right before she began her hole digging, she looked up at the fading ghost and said, "Good night to you too, Dwight D. Eisenhower." Space. There's too much of it, thought Andrea Laserzone, as she flew around willy-nilly in her tiny cargo ship. Andrea worked for Space Amazon, delivering Xboxes and juice all over the cosmos. Those were the two most popular items on Amazon, the Xbox 2000 and juice. As she darted around in space, avoiding rocks and goo and stuff, she noticed a strange blip on her sensors. "That's strange," she said to herself. "Usually I get pretty normal blips on this thing, but wowza, is that a weird one. It looks like the weapon from Krull." It was true. The blip looked exactly like the five-sided glaive from Krull, a movie Andrea had inexplicably seen, even though it had come out hundreds of years before she was born. Not wanting to get into some sort of space fight with a huge weird knife wheel, Andrea adjusted her course to avoid the deadly blip. But the blip too changed course, and it was blipping toward her even faster than before. "Mayday!" yelled Andrea into her super radio. "I'm out in the middle of space flying around all willy-nilly, and the stab hoop from Krull is following me." There was no answer. The only thing she heard was her own heavy breathing and the deadly blip of the Krull blade as it crawled its way closer and closer. "Dang, look at how big that thing must be," she said, comparing the blade's blip to the blip of a nearby Space Denny's. "It's 4 times the size of that Space Denny's." Soon, the spinning dagger ring was upon her, and she noticed with astonishment that it was alive. Sure, it was a metallic 5-bladed glaive, but it also had a huge, gross eye right in the center, staring intensely at her tiny ship. "Andrea Laserzone," boomed the beast from a mouth unseen. "I am Krull, named after the 1983 cult classic Krull." "Yeah, I've seen that," said Andrea. "Really?" "Yeah." "Cool. Anyway, you delivered to me an Xbox 2000, and it doesn't work and I need to return it. The juice I got was fine, but the Xbox just beeps and then shuts back off." You have to go through Amazon for that. I just do deliveries." "Oh, I see. Okay, I'll go do that. Thank you for your assistance." The mighty Krull began spinning with unthinkable speed and then shot away into the stars. When she was sure Krull was long gone, Andrea opened a secret trick drawer under her seat and took out a small handgun. As she examined the weapon in her hand, she wondered how much longer she would get away with it. How much longer before Space Amazon discovered that every Xbox 2000 delivered by Andrea Laserzone had been shot to death. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but what if you prefer hot dishes, like chicken fingers or a steaming fresh pizza? These are the thoughts that haunted Jenny as she planned her dastardly revenge. Jenny had been betrayed by her best friend in the whole world, Angelica. They were supposed to go see Goosebumps 2 Haunted Halloween together, but at the last minute, Angelica bailed. Jenny went and saw the movie anyway and thought it was boring, but she knew the experience would have been elevated by the presence of her traitorous friend. I can't believe Angelica made me see Goosebumps 2 Haunted Halloween all by myself, thought Jenny. She will pay for this. Pay in blood. That much she knew for sure. Angelica was going to pay for her crime in blood. But how to collect? And how to make sure the revenge didn't turn out to be some sort of gross cold dish like gazpacho? Revenge is hard, thought Jenny, but it's the only way. Hey Jenny, said Angelica, appearing from around a corner. Whoa, said Jenny, startled at this sudden appearance. What are you doing here? What am I doing here at the Dillards? Asked Angelica, for they were both in fact currently in a Dillard's department store, one of 292 convenient locations. I'm shopping for something for my grandmother. Yeah, me too, said Jenny. That was pretty much the only reason to be in a Dillard's, grandma gifts. Well, I just finished shopping, so I'm gonna head out. See you later, Jenny, said Angelica, and then she turned to leave. Wait, said Jenny, grabbing Angelica by the arm. Before you go, did you know that the largest Dillard's in the world is in Scottsdale, Arizona? It's 365,000 square feet, Angelica. I did not know that. Wow, said Angelica. Then Jenny stabbed her in the chest, instantly turning Angelica into a ghost. Hey, what? Said Angelica. Now we're even, said Jenny. For what? Asked Angelica. I don't even remember, honestly. Jenny went to jail for that, and Angelica haunts that Dillard's department store to this very day, because this all happened yesterday. Everyone has a shadow, a copy of yourself that lives on the floor, flat and dark, a menacing specter you can never escape, not even through death. Dead people still have shadows, you know. That's what Brenda was thinking 2 years ago today. It was the moment that sent her on an incredible journey, a quest whose end was finally here. She had the shadow-slaying sword now, and it was time to stab her shadow to death. Breathing heavily with fear and anticipation, she raised the blade above her head, looking down upon her shadow, which was just hanging out on the gross, dirty floor like some sort of vagabond. I hate you, she said to the shadow. I've always hated you, ever since I first saw you when I was a baby. You were also a baby then, but you were still gross and villainous. She raised the blade higher, readying the strike. You've been there through every day of my life, lurking. Not lurking in the shadows because you kind of disappear in the shadows, but lurking nonetheless. She raised the blade even higher. By now, it was just about as high as it could go. The shadow was also raising a blade, which concerned her a bit, but there was no turning back now. After today, I will finally be able to enjoy a nice sunny day in the park without thinking about the fact that I'm constantly stepping on you everywhere I go. It's so weird, and I hate it. Brenda tried to raise the blade even higher, but it was impossible. She simply did not have any more arm. Alright, this is it. Bye, Shadow, you son of a gun. With that, she forced the blade down, and her aim was true. The sword sliced into the shadow, killing it instantly. Ha 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 ha! She cried with demented joy. Freedom at last! But the shadow did not fade. Its weird shadow body had gone limp and still, but it was still there. Brenda backed away, and the shadow followed, like a corpse being dragged behind a Brenda. Oh no, she said, putting her hands to her mouth. No, no, no! The shadow was dead, but it was still a shadow. It would still be with her wherever she went, but now as a dark, smelly, rotting corpse. Gross.
It's time. That's what the box said. It's time. That's all it ever said. Lavina lived in a small apartment with cold brick walls and a rough stone floor. There was a rug in the center of the room, but it was so scratchy that she preferred the stone. It's time. The box was black and featureless, embedded in the wall across from the front door. Sometimes it would go hours or even days without saying anything. Sometimes it talked non-stop. It's time. It's time. I know it's time, said Lavina, irritated at the box for being so talkative today. You don't have to tell me. It's time. Lavina threw one of her old shirts over the box. It didn't do a good job muffling the voice, but at least she didn't have to look at it. It's time. I should have gone to the grocery store yesterday, she said out loud to herself. I'm out of food. I should have gone to the grocery store. There was leftover rice in the fridge, but it was a few days old and she didn't feel like eating it. It's time. I don't have the car again until Wednesday. I should have gone to the grocery store. Lavina sat on the floor and leaned back against the refrigerator, the hot air flowing under it warming her body. It's not time. Lavina's head shot up. She stared at the spot on the wall where the box was, now covered by her old shirt. What did you say? Silence. Unsteadily, she got to her feet. What did you say? The box did not respond. In the 4 years she had lived in this apartment, she had never heard it say anything except, "It's time." She had certainly never heard it say, "It's not time." Had her mind played a trick on her? She was very hungry and pretty tired. It had been a difficult week. "Answer me," she yelled, and stormed over to the wall in which the box made its home. "Answer me!" She ripped her shirt away, revealing nothing. A flat wall. There was no box. She gasped, and her legs gave out, sending her crashing to the ground. "It's gone!" she yelled. "It's gone!" She never saw the box again, which is a good thing, because the box was a metaphor, and she didn't understand for what. I don't either. Do you?
Her name was Lola. She was a showgirl, with yellow feathers in her hair and a dress cut down to there. She would merengue and do the cha-cha, and while she tried to be a star, Tony always tended bar across the crowded floor. They worked from 8 till 4. They were young and they had each other. Who could ask for more? Those are lyrics to Copacabana by Barry Manilow. It was that very song that Wendy had stuck in her head when she was murdered. And now, 30 years later, she was a ghost and the song was still stuck in her head. You see, ghosts don't have the ability to get songs unstuck from their heads. So if you die with a song rattling around up there, it's there for good. His name was Rico, thought Wendy. He wore a diamond. She didn't know if he wore a diamond ring or earring or what. She just knew Rico wore a diamond. Wendy haunted the hotel where she had been murdered, and guests would often complain about hearing a woman loudly humming Copacabana all night. There was blood and a single gunshot, but just who shot who? She thought a lot about those lyrics. It was probably Rico who shot Tony, based on the rest of the song, but she wasn't 100% sure, and not knowing drove her absolutely bananas. At the Copa, don't fall in love, she sung. A nearby hotel guest who was trying to sleep pulled a pillow tighter over their head. Don't fall in love. Wendy wanted to fall in love, but all she could think about was Copacabana. All night, all day, Copacabana. She couldn't even remember what existence without the song was like. But that was 30 years ago, she thought, when they used to have a show. Now it's a disco. But not for Lola. The hotel guest threw the pillow aside and called up the front desk again, complaining about the singing. Wendy floated to another room. At the Copa, sung Wendy as she phased through a wall. She lost her love. There was something wrong with Julia 24. Her ears were just a little too wobbly. Her nose was just a little too twitchy. Her eyes had a sort of shark look, as if there was a shark looking from behind them. But that was nonsense, of course. How could a shark have gotten inside Julia 24? She wasn't nearly as big as a whole shark. The idea was nonsense. Still, Julia 12 was concerned. She had been concerned before about Julia 8 and Julia 26, but nothing had come of that. Those two Julias were still doing what they should be doing, which was machine maintenance and dentistry respectively. Julia 12 was operations manager at Julia Dome. It had previously been Julia 6's job, but she had gone missing 6 months ago. Just straight up disappeared from the whole dang dome. It wasn't the first time they had lost a Julia, but it was the first time they hadn't been able to at least find a Julia body. Julia 24, said Julia 12, approaching the area she was resting in the Julia Dome's atrium. Yes, Julia 12, said Julia 24. Her voice, that was another thing. It was wrong, just slightly too shark-like. I have concerns, said Julia 12. Oh? Yeah, your ears are a little too wobbly, and your nose is a little too twitchy. Oh, geez, really? Dang, sorry, Julia 12. I didn't realize my face bits weren't to your liking, you big weirdo. Julia 12 stepped forward, an angry look forming in her two gray Julia eyes. Listen here, Julia 24. I'm operations manager, and I need to make sure everything is running tip-top. Tip-top, I say. And my nose and ears aren't tippy-toppy? It's not really about the nose and ears, said Julia 12, trying to figure out how to put her concerns into words. It's more this feeling I have, like there's a shark controlling your body somehow. I think the problem here, said Julia 24, looking at Julia 12 with a shark's intensity, is that you've got some sort of shark-based anxieties that you're projecting onto me. Oh, yeah, that's probably it, said Julia 12. Just then, Julia 6 walked up. Hey everyone, where the heck have you been? Asked Julia 12. Oh, I got locked out of Julia Dome and got eaten. I'm a Julia ghost now. The same thing happened to me, said Julia 24, but I'm a Julia shark now. I knew it, said Julia 12. Yeah, you got me, said Julia 24, and then she ate Julia 12, setting off a chain of events that killed the dinosaurs, because this all happened 60 million years ago. I don't see what the big deal is, said Evelyn, walking along the old graveyard with a flashlight in her hand. Patricia, walking beside her, gave a long sigh. This isn't baby stuff anymore, she said. I know this isn't baby stuff, said Evelyn. We're teens now. We don't do baby magic, we do teen magic. Evelyn and Patricia were both witches who had recently finished their baby magic classes and were deep into teen magic, the most radical of all magics. I just don't think you've thought through all the consequences, said Patricia. There are always consequences with teen magic, and the more radical the magic, the more gnarly the consequences. Evelyn stopped walking, her flashlight steadily illuminating a tombstone in front of them. Well, we're here, she said, and then she took off her backpack and began taking out candles and leaves and other witch things. Can I have my Lunchable? Asked Patricia. We only have one Lunchable each, and it has to last us the night, said Evelyn. I know, said Patricia. So can I have my Lunchable? Evelyn handed Patricia her Lunchable. I'm not giving you any of mine if you're still hungry later, said Evelyn, knowing she totally would if Patricia asked. That's fine, said Patricia, also knowing that Evelyn would totally give her some of her Lunchable later. Suddenly, there was a terrible screeching howl, which rattled each of Evelyn and Patricia's teen bones. An instant later, a spectral form appeared before them. It was unmistakably the ghost of 20th century American businessman William Randolph Hearst. Who dares disturb my slumber again? Bellowed the ghost of Mr. Hearst. It was then that Evelyn noticed all the candles and leaves and empty Lunchable containers already sitting beneath the tombstone. We're not the first teens to come here tonight, she whispered to Patricia, who was mostly ignoring the going-ons and munching on her Lunchable. There were hooligans here earlier who summoned me from the afterworld, only to then take turns kicking me in my ghost nads. In one swift movement, before the ghost could react, Evelyn swung her leg up and kicked him directly in the ghost nads. He howled in pain and anger. That's why we're here too, Evelyn said, and then held Patricia's Lunchable as she administered her own ghost nad kick. Those were the good old days, when carefree teen witches summoned the ghosts of racist newspaper moguls and kicked them in their spooky genitals. Of course, all that changed when the red whale woke from her 10,000-year slumber. But that's another story. Hello, friends. I am Relno, the Storykeeper, here with a frightful tale to chill your bones. This is the story of João Goulart. It was the 1960s, Brazil. João Goulart had been elected president on a platform of democratic reform. He wished to create government-funded programs to combat adult illiteracy and expand voting rights. But above all, he wished to redistribute agricultural land to give more people ownership over their labor. But as Goulart made these plans, an ominous shadow began to creep across the streets of Brazil. With every new reform, with every step taken towards a more equitable future, this hungry shadow grew ever closer, until finally it reached the feet of Goulart himself. This shadow was the CIA. You see, John F. Kennedy had sent Goulart a letter asking for Brazil's help in a land invasion of Cuba. Goulart replied that he would never recognize war as an instrument capable of resolving conflicts between nations. Kennedy, personally insulted and worried about all that anti-American commie stuff Goulart was getting up to, gave the CIA the task of making sure Brazil remained true to American values. Thus, Operation Brother Sam was born, a CIA operation to aid a coup d'etat against Goulart through propaganda, psychological warfare, 110 tons of ammunition and tear gas, an aircraft carrier, 2 guided missile destroyers, and who knows what else. Well, the coup was successful, and Goulart was run out of the country to be replaced by a pro-US military dictatorship. Goulart himself was later poisoned to death, likely by agents acting under the command of the CIA as part of Operation Condor. As for the shadow, some say it still stalks the streets of Brazil to this very day. That's all for now. I'm Relno, the Storykeeper, reminding you to stay spooky. Hello again, friends. I am Relno, the Storykeeper, here with a frightful tale to chill your bones. This is the creature from the northern woods. It was 1962, the United States of America. Anti-communist fervor wasn't quite what it had been in the 50s. Fidel Castro had risen to power in Cuba just a few years earlier, but after the US-backed Bay of Pigs invasion had ended so disastrously, there was little public support in the States for a war with his government. As John F. Kennedy debated over which human rights violations he was willing to commit against the Cuban people, a lumbering, flesh-hungry creature began its own plans against the United States. This creature was developing dastardly schemes to blow up US military bases, sink US ships, shoot down civilian planes, and even set off pipe bombs in major US cities. This plotting, bloodthirsty, murderous creature was the CIA. Without public support for military action against Cuba, but dearly wishing for it, the U.S. Department of Defense developed Operation Northwoods, a plot to manufacture that support through CIA false flag terrorist attacks against its own citizens and military. The plan was signed by General Lyman Lemnitzer and authorized by Kennedy's Joint Chiefs of Staff. Unfortunately for this foul creature, Kennedy's own lust for blood extended mostly to foreigners, and so the plan was never carried out. Although some say if the night is clear and the winds are calm, you can still hear its stomach growl. That's all for now. I'm Relno, the Storykeeper, reminding you to stay spooky. Oh yes, hello friends. Was just doing a little story keeping. Speaking of which, this is The Watcher and Juan Jose Torres. It was the 1970s, Bolivia, a time of great instability, with various military dictators vying for control through bloodier and bloodier coups. One such coup by Rogelio Miranda lasted only a day before he was replaced by the much more popular Juan Jose Torres. Unfortunately for Torres, he immediately fell into the cold gaze of the Watcher. You see, Torres was part of a new generation of Bolivian military leaders, a socialist who, upon taking power, immediately created a parliamentary People's Assembly made up of teachers, miners, farmers, and the like, with the hopes of shifting the balance of power in the country from the foreign capitalists to the Bolivian working class. The Watcher was greatly displeased by this push for worker power, and Torres's promise to protect Bolivia's natural resources from foreign interests. You see, the Watcher was the CIA. United States President Richard Nixon was very concerned about peasants gaining political power in Bolivia, and so he offered massive financial and intelligence supports to would-be dictator Hugo Banzer. Banzer, using this support, violently ousted Torres and spent the next 7 years ruling Bolivia in a CIA-friendly manner. For instance, he created what was known as the Horror Chambers in the basement of the Ministry of the Interior, which was used to torture thousands of dissidents such as students and nuns. Torres himself had fled to Buenos Aires, where 5 years later he was kidnapped and murdered by agents acting under the command of the CIA as part of Operation Condor. As for the Watcher, no doubt it watches still. Does it watch you? That's all for now. I'm Relno the Storykeeper, reminding you to stay spooky. Hello friends, I am Relno the Storykeeper, here with a frightful tale to chill your bones. This is the hand that guides the butcher. You may have noticed a pattern to these stories, and nothing is less spooky than predictability, so I'll say right up front, the hand is not the CIA. You got that? It's not the CIA. Our story begins in 1942, France. German Gestapo leader Klaus Barbie had been assigned as commander of the secret police in the occupied city of Lyon. He was an especially cruel man, even by Nazi standards. Even by the standards of the worst Nazis. He made it his business to personally torture, maim, and murder children. And by the end of the occupation had more than 14,000 deaths to his name, earning him the title, the Butcher of Lyon. The war ended in 1945, although the butcher's work was not yet complete. You see, a mysterious hand swooped in, plucked him up, and hid him away, so that he could avoid punishment for his many crimes and continue his legacy of unspeakable barbarism. That hand was the CIC. And yes, later the CIA. You see, the CIA hadn't been formed yet, and so the United States Army's Counterintelligence Corps handled this one at first. The CIC thought Barbie would be helpful in America's anti-communist efforts, so they put him up in a hotel and paid him to report on any communists he saw working with the French government. Later, the Butcher of Lyon, thanks to CIA support, moved to Bolivia, where he enjoyed a long and prosperous career kidnapping and torturing leftists, even becoming a regular collaborator with Bolivian dictator Hugo Banzer. As for the hand, it's true that the CIC is no more, but a hand wearing a different glove is the same hand. That's all for now. I'm Relno the Storykeeper, reminding you to stay spooky. Hello friends, I am Relno the Storykeeper, here with a frightful tale to chill your bones. This is the coming of the valuable fiend. Our story begins in the 1940s, Albania. Post-World War II, Albania was run by the Democratic Front, a political group of anti-fascist communists created by resistance fighters who had fought the invading forces of both Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. 30,000 Albanians had died in the war, and almost 10% of the population had been left homeless thanks to hundreds of destroyed villages. Things were dire, but the Democratic Front had solid plans to rebuild the country and empower the struggling masses. Of course, a certain fiend had other plans. It began as a trickle. People began arriving by air, land, and sea, trained by the fiend to, and I quote, blow things up and generally cause lots of destruction. You see, the fiend, being a fiend, cared not about the homeless and hungry, but did care very deeply about those homeless and hungry potentially becoming communists. This fiend, of course, was the CIA, and also MI6. It was a sort of collab. MI6 named their operation Valuable, and the CIA named theirs Fiend. When fused together, they became the Valuable Fiend. Unfortunately for the CIA and MI6, the Albanian communists were extremely good at recognizing well-funded fiends, and so nearly every agent was captured before they were able to cause all that much mischief. You might think this a happy ending, but the Fiend first and foremost considered Albania a testing ground for fiendish deeds to come. Deeds that, I fear, continue to this very day. That's all for now. I'm Relno the Storykeeper, reminding you to stay spooky. Well, well, friends, I am Relno the Storykeeper, here with a frightful tale to chill your bones. This is the train on the second track. It was the 1970s, Chile. Salvador Allende had just become the country's 56th president. Allende, a socialist, was not interested in violent revolution as a means of transforming his country. He instead believed that a transition from capitalism to socialism could be achieved peacefully. Under his watch, the government nationalized various factories owned by foreign capitalists and redistributed the profits to the Chilean workers. Unemployment was down, housing was becoming more affordable, things seemed to be going well. But all the while, a train had been chugging along in forgotten secret tunnels, circling Allende and getting ready to switch to the second track. This secretive, conniving train was Henry Kissinger, and the second track was the CIA. You see, United States President Richard Nixon simply could not let a socialist run a foreign country. Running foreign countries was America's job. So he gave Secretary of State Henry Kissinger the task of overthrowing Allende using absolutely any means necessary. Kissinger developed 2 tracks for removing the democratically elected leader. Track 1 involved secretly convincing the Chilean Congress to overturn the election results. When that failed, he moved to Track 2, the CIA. The operation began with Rene Schneider, the commander of the Chilean army. Schneider, a constitutionalist, would never have supported a coup against a legally elected president. So the CIA sent $50,000 and a bunch of guns to some disgruntled generals, and Schneider was promptly murdered. This paved the way for CIA-backed Augusto Pinochet to violently overthrow Allende's government and install himself as a fascist dictator, a position he held for 17 years. Thousands were tortured and murdered under his rule, including more than 100 civilians who were simply thrown out of helicopters into the ocean as a form of execution. By the time of Pinochet's death in 2006, he had more than 300 criminal charges pending against him in Chile for human rights violations. As for the train, they say if you put your ear to the ground, you can still hear it chugging along. That's all for now. I'm Relno the Storykeeper, reminding you to stay spooky. Yes, of course. Hello, friends. I am Relno the Storykeeper, here with a frightful tale to chill your bones. This is the Falconer and the Dirty Bird. It was 1974, Argentina. Juan Perón, president of Argentina, was dead. This meant Vice President Isabel Perón, his wife, inherited the office of the presidency, making her the first woman president of any country in the history of the earth. Her tenure as president was rocky, to say the least. Workers had always made up the bulk of Peronist supporters. However, with rising unrest due to inflation and economic instability, Perón turned on those workers, sending brutal police assaults against the Unionists. All the while, the sinister Falconer had sent his filthiest, grimiest, most unsanitary bird to watch Perón. This disgusting bird, sitting atop its grimy perch, was thinking, there is not nearly enough suffering going on here. The dirty bird, of course, was the CIA.
and the falconer was Henry Kissinger. You see, United States Secretary of State Henry Kissinger had never been satisfied with the mere subduing of labor movements. Labor movements needed to be genocided. Thus, he sent his favorite gross bird, in the form of the CIA's Operation Condor, to kickstart what became known as the Dirty War. Perón was removed from power in a CIA-backed coup, and a military junta was established in her place. This junta began what they dishonestly called a dirty war. It wasn't actually a war. It was a wave of murder, torture, and rape, committed by the junta's forces against unionists, journalists, students, artists, activists, and, frankly, whoever. Pregnant women were kidnapped so that their babies could be stolen and given to military families. The mothers were then drugged, stripped, and dropped out of airplanes into the Atlantic Ocean to drown. Kissinger approved these tactics: the murder, the torture, the rape, the baby kidnapping. His only critique was that the junta needed to do it all faster, as he was worried outcry over the massive human rights violations might force the US to scale back their financial and intelligence support. In the end, however, the so-called Dirty War lasted 7 years. Many members of the junta are now in prison for genocide. The bird, however, and of course the bird's falconer, continue their dirty work to this very day. That's all for now. I'm Relno the Storykeeper, reminding you to stay spooky. Hello again, friends. I am Relno the Storykeeper, here with another frightful tale to chill your bones. This is the story of the Midnight Hunter. The year was 1954. A nefarious hunter was stalking the streets of major US cities in the dead of night, seeking victims to drug or poison and then conduct experiments on. Initially, victims were lured back to one of several secret lairs, but soon the hunter became bolder, secretly drugging people at restaurants or bars with increasingly dangerous substances. This dastardly hunter, with drugs in one hand and poisons in the other, was George Hunter White. Under the direction of the CIA. You see, CIA spy master Sidney Gottlieb, best known as the head of Project MK-Ultra, was concerned about Soviet advancements in mind control drugs and poisons. Thus, Operation Midnight Climax was born, a sub-project of MK-Ultra headed by George Hunter White. The project was named after its initial use of sex workers to lure men back to CIA-operated brothels, where the unsuspecting Johns would be drugged or poisoned and then watched by agents from behind a one-way mirror. The experiments varied wildly. In some, attempts were made to brainwash people into committing robberies or murders. In others, various poisons were administered to test their vile effects and longevity. Most of the documents detailing the experiments were destroyed, but a letter from George Hunter White thanking Sidney Gottlieb for the opportunity sheds some light on the general vibe. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest? Pretty good stuff, brother. The operation was shut down in 1963, and George Hunter White died in 1975. But do you think he was the last hunter a certain agency sent stalking its own citizens? That's all for now. I'm Relno the Storykeeper, reminding you to stay spooky.
Let me tell you a little more about my first meeting with Nick. We were both feeling hungry, me from a long day of bowling and Nick from whatever it is Nick does when people aren't looking, so I invited him to dinner at a local cafe. As we walked down the sidewalk towards our evening meal, we came across a little girl in a wrinkled lace dress, alone and crying. Nick kneeled down next to the girl and with a calming tone he said, "Hey, I'm Nick. It's okay. Sometimes I cry too. Here, take this." Like magic, he pulled a silver compass from his pocket and placed it in her tiny hands. Her crying stopped, and a steadiness began to form in her eyes. "I hope you don't lose your way again," he said, and then gave a comforting smile. With that, he was done, and we continued on our way to the cafe. I got a hamburger. Nick asked for toast and a banana. That night I dreamed of the little girl. She wasn't sad anymore. Her dress was tidy, and she had a peaceful presence about her. Then a huge shark appeared out of nowhere and tore one of her arms off. Here's something you probably don't know about Nick. The day after he was born, Nick was kidnapped from the hospital by a deranged nurse who was convinced that he was the reincarnated spirit of her dead Labrador. After a few days, she became overwhelmed with paranoia about being caught and abandoned him in the middle of a dark forest, alone and defenseless. At some point, he was found by a small colony of white rabbits who brought him food and kept him warm during the chill of night. 7 months he was out there in the forest. 7 months he was kept alive only by the love and protection of wild rabbits. Then, something happened. A terrible accident. Nick had somehow injured one of the rabbits, and it was dying. On July 21st, 1987, an elderly couple was driving to dinner when they saw a baby boy covered in dirt and rabbit hair walking out of the forest with a wounded bunny in his arms. At just 7 months old, Nick had taught himself how to walk so that he could save that animal. Tragically, however, it was too late. The rabbit died in his arms while the elderly couple drove him to the police station. Nick was returned to his parents alive and healthy, but with a weighty guilt. A shame and sadness that he carries with him still to this day. If you look into his eyes long enough, you can see it. You can see that rabbit. Things I've learned about Nick from friends, family, acquaintances, and admirers. Nick enjoys eating soup with a fork because it lasts longer. Nobody can remember any details about any of Nick's birthday parties even though they're sure they attended. Nick has a calming effect on birds, to such a degree that they occasionally fall out of the sky when flying in his proximity. Nick has never shaved, and yet he has no facial hair. The only thing Nick fears is the possibility of meeting himself. Nick can tap dance with one foot. People have trouble recalling the color of Nick's eyes, even moments after looking at them. Animals of all species seem to get along with Nick immediately, with the exception of horses, who refuse to make eye contact. Nick's middle name is an asterisk. People seem to remember Nick once owning a humongous golden snake, although they can't recall why, when, or what happened to it. Nick's favorite drink is half root beer and half another brand of root beer. When he was a teenager, Nick started growing feathers on his back. They were gone by the time he turned 20. Nick once disappeared for 18 months, and when he returned, he no longer had any of his previous food allergies. My favorite Nick story is also an impossible one, but it's one I've heard enough times from enough people that I think it's worth repeating. It takes place during a particularly cold winter 4 years ago, while Nick was vacationing with some friends at a cabin in upstate New York. And by vacationing with some friends, I mean Nick showed up at a cabin some people were staying at, and they decided that even though they had never met him before, it felt like he belonged there. One afternoon, during a brief break in the snowfall, one of the friends, his name was George I think, went out to collect some extra firewood. Hours later, when he hadn't returned, the rest of them, Nick included, left the cabin to find him. It wasn't a long search. They soon came across George walking calmly through the woods, still carrying his wood chopping axe. But something was wrong. Unexplainably wrong. Half of George's face was missing. And not torn off missing, but was never there in the first place missing. And the way he walked, and moved, and barely noticed his friends, it was like half his soul was missing as well. Not sure what else to do, the friends brought him back to the cabin and tried calling the hospital. But the lines had gone dead days before, and there was no cell phone reception in the area. The snow had picked up, and it was getting dark, so they decided to wait until morning before trying to brave the weather in their car. Nobody got much sleep that night. George said nothing, nor did he respond to anyone who tried talking with him. He just stared at the cabin door with his one remaining eye, never blinking. The other friends began to grow paranoid and blocked the door with a sofa. The only person who seemed to remain calm was Nick, although he never let George out of his sight. Morning came, and with it arrived harsher snowfall and stronger winds. George was still staring at the cabin door, which by now was blocked not only by the sofa, but 2 dressers as well. After much discussion, a decision was made. The weather wasn't likely to get better anytime soon, and George was in desperate need of medical attention, so they had to face the snowed-over roads and get to the city. The sofa and dressers were moved, and the cabin door was opened. Immediately, George shot forward like a rubber band and ran out into the snow, and then back into the woods. The rest of the friends poured out after him. It was a bitter cold that day, a cold that gets into your head, a cold that makes you forget ever being warm, that infects your memories, that twists your thoughts. I mention this because of the impossibility of what they found in those woods while looking for George. It was a man, or rather, it was an offense to man, a blasphemous copy. The shape of a man, put together wrong from pieces of other men, none of them quite matching. And its face was half of George's face, and half a stolen image from some other unfortunate victim. None of the friends could speak, or even scream, just looking at this thing. It made you feel like a mannequin, a blank vessel. Nothing. You were lost. Lost in the gaze of stolen eyes. Only Nick seemed unaffected by the presence of the borrowed man. Only Nick could step forward. Only Nick could remember himself enough to address that statue of looted lives. He stared at it, not the taken pieces, but the horrible being itself, and with a steady voice he said, "Hey, I'm Nick. Can you give George his face back?" That night was spent in silence. George's body was whole again, but every one of them felt like they had lost something of themselves. I remember the first time I had a Nick dream. I was on a cold, empty beach, but it didn't look like any beach I had ever been to. The sand was silver, and the sky was a hazy pink. I had goat legs for some reason, but it felt like they had always been there. I stood in the sand, watching the waves come in for what seemed like hours. Eventually, a shape began to emerge from the water. At first, it was featureless and abstract, but as it got closer, the shape developed more defined qualities, until I could clearly see the naked figure of Nick. He walked up the beach and stood next to me, and for a while we both watched the waves in silence. At some point he began to talk, and I remember finding his voice soothing and almost hypnotic. He told me that he was an immortal, that he had been around since the first Earth, and that he would still be around for the last. I asked him questions about life, about reality, about everything I had ever wanted to know, and he answered each question, although I can no longer recall what he said. I felt at peace with both myself and the world. The sun started to set, and Nick said goodbye, at which point he slowly slipped back into the water. Then a huge shark appeared out of nowhere and tore off one of his arms.
How dare you? How can you say that Nick isn't special? He's like the nicest, most laid-back guy I've ever met.
Okay, yeah, this isn't gonna happen, no. Chris was an asshole all day and basically ruined my movie. I'm not going to let the story end with him being the hero, even if he is yelling at that horrible corporate douchebag. So here's my artistic rendition of what took place. "How could you say Nick isn't special?" yelled Chris to the creepy new age corporate man. "Nick is the nicest guy I've ever met. A people's champion. The most laid-back dude on earth. We should all aspire to be a Nick. Not by stealing his skin or anything crazy like that, but by relaxing all of the muscles in our body and letting ourselves be moved entirely by the wind. People like you and me, people who are total assholes with no redeeming qualities whatsoever, there's plenty of us in the world. There aren't that many Nicks." Then Chris slammed his gigantic, stupid forehead into the man, sending him spiraling away into space, never to be heard from again. "I'm sorry, Nick," said Chris in his terrible, grating voice. "I clearly have severe emotional and social problems, and I let that ruin your day and Robert's movie. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I am nothing without you. I promise if you give me a second chance, I'll try not to be such a selfish assbag. Can we start over? Can we start our friendship from the beginning?" A moment passed, and then Nick reached out his hand and said, "Hey, I'm Nick. Nice to meet you." You know why? Because Nick is the biggest sweetheart in the world. Chris's soul was flooded with joy. It was the happiest moment of his life. The world was bright and glowing with promise. Doves appeared overhead and chirped a delightful, triumphant melody. Dolphins around the world shot out of the water and did magnificent flips in the air. Chris smiled the biggest smile of his life. A face made from pure, sparkling bliss. And then a huge sword came flying out of nowhere and plunged right up his ass. Just perfectly and completely up his ass. And it hurt exactly as much as you would expect a sword up the ass to hurt. Chris screamed in pain and agony, then fell to the ground. His smile had turned to shit. After crying for an hour or two, he managed to regain his composure and pulled the sword out. At which point, another even larger sword came flying out of nowhere and stuck directly up his ass again. From that point on, for all of eternity, Chris had a sharp, painful sword stuck up his ass. And every time he tried to remove it, an even larger and more painful sword would fly out of nowhere and stick up his ass anew. The end.
Hey, I'm Luca, and welcome to my spooky stories! What is this smell over here? It kind of smells like a... kind of smells like a little mushroom, I guess. Well, I guess it's story time. I don't know if you noticed I got a shave spot there. That's cause, I'm dying. I've got cancer. I've got kitty cancer. You know, life's a roller coaster. Well, speaking of roller coasters, whoa, yeah! Hey!
Yeah, I thought I saw a spooky bug over there or something. Oh, loop-de-loop. Oh, here we go. Oh, this is a great roller coaster. Oh, all right. Hey, how you doing? Kitty foot. I'll be honest, guys, I don't really feel like telling this story. So I'll see you next time.